Hello, welcome to another episode in my podcast, Delving Deep with Endless Curiosity. Today we are thrilled to have with us one of the most respected figures in the music industry, Bobby Owsinski. Bobby has been a musician, producer, author and educator for over 4 decades, working with iconic artists like The Who, Neil Young and of course the Rolling Stones. He's authored over 25 books on music production, engineering and business. He's also a sought-after speaker and consultant and hosts his own podcast, Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. Today, we'll be talking to Bobby about his personal and professional journey, exploring the biggest turning points and defining moments in his career, as well as some of the most memorable and unique experiences he's had working with artists over the years. We'll also delve into his insights in the music industry, including common misconceptions about music production and engineering, promising new business models and strategies for musicians and producers in the age of streaming and digital distribution and the influence of AI on music today. But that's not all. We'll also discuss broader topics of interest, such as the parallels between challenges facing the music industry and those facing other creative industries like film or publishing. Exciting developments happening in music right now, and how Bobby's technical expertise and passion for music combine in his writing process. And of course, we'll wrap up the conversation with a bit of fun, asking Bobby to share a personal story that he considers to be the funniest thing that has happened to him or someone he knows. So get ready to learn from one of the industry's most respected experts and hear some entertaining stories along the way. Without further ado, let's welcome Bobby Owsinski to the podcast. Yeah, firstly, I wanted to thank you for agreeing to do the podcast. I've been a big fan of yours for quite some time. First of all, before we start anything, do you want to tell anyone who's watching where they can find you, and if you've got anything happening in your life at the moment that you want people to see?
Well, it's just my latest book, the 5th edition of the Recording Engineer's Handbook, and if you go to bobbyowsinski.com,
Awesome.
all roads lead to
Awesome.
there, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've had such a huge career. Firstly, I wanted to ask. I like asking this particular question to everyone that I interview or that I talk to. It's basically I really like to try and understand what was the point in your life where you felt like everything that you had done, all the work that you had done, was kind of paying off, and in the sense that we as creatives, you kind of go through such a long process without the monetary reward, I suppose. At what point in your career did you feel like, what, this is why I'm doing this? Was it a particular person that you met, or a particular job that you did?
Well, there were two. The first one was as a guitar player.
Yeah, awesome.
And to back up, I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, 4,500 people,
Yeah.
small. And there was no chance that you can get out of there for the most part. And I remember listening to a live concert on the radio by the Rolling Stones and hearing Mick Taylor whip off this fantastic solo, and thinking to myself, I'd do anything to work with people like that.
Yeah, awesome.
20 years later, I'm at SIR in Los Angeles, the rehearsal facility, and I'm the musical director for Mick Taylor. And at the end of our rehearsal, before we go out and tour, Mick said, I feel like playing the Stones song. You play the lead, pointing at me.
Yeah.
And he detunes his guitar into that drop G tuning, that famous tuning. He says, let's play Jumpin' Jack Flash. And when he hit that first chord, I remember thinking, I've made it.
Yeah.
I may not go any farther in the business, but this is what I wanted, and this is what happened. And I was overcome. Now, I couldn't play the song after that, so I messed it up, but it didn't matter because it was like, oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Then the second one was, after I was writing for a little bit, I was writing articles and for magazines, a dozen of them or so. And then I decided I was a good recording engineer, but I wasn't a good mixer. And I thought, I got to find out how to do this. But I know all these people that are great. I
Yep.
go ask them. And that resulted in the first edition of the Mixing Engineer's Handbook. And I didn't think much of it. I wrote it and I sent it out to 5 publishers, and all 5 wanted it. So there was one publisher in particular that was particularly aggressive about it. And I remember when it came out, and there were all these sales because there was no other mixing book on the market.
Yep.
And thinking to myself, well, this is pretty good. This is something I never expected, and it's turning out really well. So, there was those 2 points, and then that part of my career went that way for a while.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. That's awesome, man. I love trying to find out. I mean, I enjoy people. I enjoy stories for starters, and I like it trying to work out points in people's life where they feel like all their hard work has paid off. I feel like it's important to talk about because a lot of young people who are coming up, they feel like when you're living in the moment, you don't really necessarily know it, but there's always that one moment where you do. And I feel like it's always important to kind of look out for it, and be aware of it, and enjoy that moment. So I think, yeah, I enjoy talking about stuff like that because it definitely helps younger people kind of, yeah, I suppose, realize that there's moments that will happen in your life that will make you feel good about what you've done, and that you should definitely keep persevering. I mean, and how old, like how long back were these moments, particular moments, from now, or how far into your career had you already done before you experienced those?
Well, the first one happened, I was about 30.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
I was doing it for quite a while by then.
Yeah.
And I continued as a player for another 10 years.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it got to the point where it's like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I suppose, are there any other particularly memorable or unique experiences like that with Mick Taylor, that you remember, that you've collaborated with, any other artists you've collaborated with over the years, that you feel like is worth, I don't know, reflecting on?
Yes. I produced a blues album for a long time. I transitioned from being a player and being a producer. I was already recording as an engineer, but I became a producer, and it was mostly blues records that I was doing.
Yeah.
And there was one for an artist, Jerry Groom. Jerry was the protege of Dwayne Allman, a fantastic
Yeah.
slide
Yeah.
player.
Yeah.
And one day he came in the studio and he said, come on, we're going to Willie Dixon's house.
Awesome.
I'm going to write a song with Willie. So we went over to Willie Dixon's house, and Willie just went off the track, and he began to compare the Lord's Prayer to the
Okay.
blues, and
Right.
how
Yeah.
the
Right.
blues were a fact of life. And he
Yep.
went through each line and
Yeah. Man.
compared it to blues, making it into a blues song
Yeah.
essentially.
Awesome.
And that was fantastic. I mean,
That's
it
awesome.
was just a marvelous
Yeah.
experience just to be in his presence.
Absolutely. Thank you for those stories. I mean, they're awesome stories. I wanted to go into a bit more with your background, in both your technical expertise in music production, as well as the deep understanding in business. How do you balance those two aspects in your work? Do you have any advice for any others to do the same? Like, how do you manage, I suppose, your music production stuff as well as the business side, and being able to mix them together so brilliantly?
It's OCD.
OCD. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get
Absolutely.
yeah, I get bored
Yeah.
fast, so it goes from one thing to another, and that's really it. So how do you? I don't know how you balance it otherwise, because I get bored at one thing and I go to something else,
That's fair
and it's
enough. Yeah.
mostly because I want I want to learn. There,
Yeah.
it's a constant learning about something. So whenever I write a book, two things happen. One is I'm trying to preserve a lot of the knowledge of the greats
Yeah.
before it kind of passes into the ether. So in a way, it's historical. It's approaching it as an historian.
Yeah.
But the second thing is I'm really interested about this subject, so I want to learn as much as I can. So
Yeah.
I stand on the shoulders of giants because everybody I interview knows a lot more about the subject than I do.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. I
So,
mean, is there a subject that you've explored that you found incredibly fascinating?
oh, recently, yeah, just right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yes, artificial intelligence, AI,
Oh, yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
machine learning,
Yeah.
and over my vacation, what I did is I spent taking a crash course from MIT on deep learning.
Okay.
So I got really into it and really into how, and because I'm going to write a book on AI for music.
Oh, really?
So
Yeah, yeah.
I
Oh, awesome.
better,
Cannot wait for that.
yeah, I thought I better really learn this stuff myself, but I found that I loved it as I got into it. It was
Yeah.
very cool.
I was going to say, do you
Uh,
find AI to be something that people should actually take an interest in?
well, there's going to be no choice pretty
Yeah.
soon,
Yeah.
uh, because it's going to be everywhere in some form or another. But I look at it as like blockchain a few years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
Blockchain
Of
was
course.
the real hot word, and everybody was coming out with blockchain this and blockchain that. When the fact of the matter is, it was an underlying technology, and if people wouldn't have hyped it so much, we'd be using it a lot more today.
Yeah.
And I think AI is pretty much the same way. It's like it's getting way overhyped when it's just an underlying technology for other things to
Yeah.
happen. So
Absolutely.
that's what's going on. The one thing I did find out that was very interesting is I'm no longer afraid of AI. There's the
Okay.
whole doomsday scenario. It's going to
Yeah.
take over and it's going to, eliminate jobs and things like
Yeah.
that. Um, no, that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's not as smart as everybody thinks. There's lots of limitations, and it's only as good as its training, and the training is hard. That's
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's easy to build a neural network,
Yep.
really,
Yep.
and there are tools that anybody can build it, but to train it, that's the hard part.
Absolutely. Do you feel with the Chat GPT 4? I know that they've recently just gone from open source to closed source. Do you feel like AI is something that everyone should be able to get their hands on and be able to create more from the source code, or do you think that it should be um, closed so that people can't use it for, I suppose, for bad things? I mean, it's such a difficult thing to decide, but I feel like, especially with ChatGPT, I mean, it can definitely be a foundation to create something uh, that may end the world or the internet. Complicated viruses and whatnot. I mean, all this stuff you can definitely use AI to create stuff like that. I mean, do you think that it should be open source or closed source, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's called filtering, and it's
Yeah.
how things are filtered, and that's built into the training essentially.
Okay.
Well, again, it's going to be one of those things that's just going to be there, and we're not going to think too much about it in a few
Yeah.
years. It's not
Yeah.
going to be that big a deal as it's going to be
Yeah.
this helper. Like whenever you're on a plugin or something and you don't
Yeah.
know how to do something, you go to help.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to be. It's just
Yeah.
going to be a variation of that,
It's going to
deeper
make it
version
easier, I
of help.
suppose. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
That,
what
that
about?
is the idea.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just going to make everything easier to navigate and whatnot. What about creative on the creative side, like with all this AI art coming out? What are your views on that? Do you think it could be something that, I mean, humans would just be like, we're not interested because we know that it's not human. I mean, music has such a strong feeling element to it that, do you think people would take to AI music, or do you think it's just going to be brushed over?
Well, yes, for things like underscores for television programs where it's
Yeah.
just behind the picture and it's
Yeah.
just music, that might be a particular place for AI. But here's the way I learned it, and it makes a lot of sense. When we're learning to play guitar, for instance, you're a guitar player.
Yep.
What do? You copy other people. You copy Eric Clapton if you like him. You copy, your favorite
Absolutely.
artist
Yep.
and creators, and you get good from that. And it's constantly, and that's what we do in art. Even if you're a painter, you look at the greats and you learn from that.
Yep.
So there comes a point where maybe you become an expert in copying and an
Yeah.
expert in doing something exactly like somebody else does.
Okay.
That doesn't necessarily make you an artist. What it makes you is a really good copyist, an expert
Yeah.
copyist.
Yeah. That's true.
And there are many people that can't tell the difference between an artist who looks at this and will take it in a completely different direction.
Yep.
And you'll go, oh, yeah, okay, never thought of that. Or I like that. It's way different than someone who's just copying.
Yeah.
So you can think of AI as this really good copyist,
Yeah.
and it's going to get better. Limitations now, but it's going to get better, and it's up to the user, you and I, to look at it, look what it gives us, and then take it to a new, clever, artistic level.
Yeah.
And that's the whole deal there. So, for the most part, it gives you stuff back and it gives you a starting place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that's not good enough.
Well, that's fair enough. I mean, what about in the sense of, I mean, you said, lots of jobs and whatnot. What about AI getting to the point where it can mix a track and just clean it and it's done in 10 minutes? I mean, do you think that could be a problem, especially with, large record labels? It'll just be a huge cost, money saver. Do you think that that could affect the industry in a huge kind of way, or I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It could, but I remember Dave Pensato,
Yep.
the mixer, telling me that people hire me to take their hit from 1 million to 10 million. There's a creative aspect that will never capture. And I know myself, with my students, for instance, I'll give them a song, some tracks, and I know how I mixed it, but I'll hear back from them, oh, wow, how'd you think of that? So there is this creative aspect that goes into it that you just can't beat.
Yeah, that's fair.
That the AI can't beat right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I suppose we've kind of already seen it with software like Lander, and automated mastering
Yes.
services. So yeah, I mean, it's an exciting thing when you think about it on one side. It'd be cool to kind of, especially for someone like me who produces my own songs and mixes and masters. It'd be useful for I suppose home studio producers, who don't, especially people in their 20s, who don't have the experience or the audio, the ear training. It could definitely yet again balance out the scope of what's accessible to people, and it's just going to level out the playing field again. uh with the introduction of laptops and DAWs, especially going from audio, analog to digital, the playing field has just leveled out, and so it's the music that has to speak, I suppose. And then is the start of the song catchy? Does it get my attention in the first 5 seconds? I mean, we're living in a world where everything's so instantaneous now. Yeah, it's definitely an exciting prospect, or it's exciting to see where it can lead, for those, you know bedroom producers who really don't know how to mix, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of my business, helping those people,
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah.
to be honest with you. But again, it's the thing. If it helps people get to a level where they go, well, this is really good. I want to get better. I have to learn a little more.
Yeah,
That's why it doesn't bother me. It doesn't, I think anything that makes this process faster is good.
absolutely.
Because again, having OCD, the last thing I want to do is spend 10 hours on something.
Yeah,
Because, by
yeah,
hour
for
5, I'm
sure,
getting nervous already. It's like, oh, I want to do something else,
for sure.
you know?
For sure. I mean, the time saving that AI will present will give us, it's going to be awesome. I reckon it's already. I utilize GPT-4 for almost everything. It's just great to. Uh, it's almost like a personal assistant. You can just ask questions and give it ideas, and it'll say, "Yeah, this is an instant." You got instant answers. But yeah, I think AI is definitely something to be excited for, in my opinion. And yeah, I can't wait to see where it goes. To be honest,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's going a lot of places. You can be
yeah,
sure.
absolutely. As someone who's spent so much time studying and analyzing the music industry, um, do you see any parallels with this AI or new technology with film or any other creative industries that it could affect?
Okay. Well, the first thing is you have to understand that the music industry has always been very proactive with new technology, and
Yeah,
they go whenever there's a new technology, music is there.
yeah,
Not because they think it's going to make music better. It's the industry thinks it's going to make more money. So
yeah,
that's but we see it every time there's a new technology. Music industry is there, but right behind it is film. And I can walk, for instance, I'm a block away from Warner Brothers.
yeah,
I can walk to Disney. I can walk to Universal. I can walk to ABC, NBC. I'm in Burbank, so it's a company town,
yeah,
and I've been to all these studios and seen over the ages how my ages anyway, how quickly they accept new technology. And the reason why is it makes their job easier, faster, or better.
absolutely.
So they have no qualms about doing anything, that's technologically new. Neither does the music industry.
Well, that's
Now you can say that the music industry as a whole went kicking and streaming and screaming into the digital age because first they sued Napster, and
yeah, yeah,
they did a lot of things wrong before finally Spotify straightened everything out and they decided they could make money off of it. So that they drug their feet a little bit there. And we're
absolutely.
starting to see a little bit of that as well with AI in something just been last week where Universal Audio, and I think this is a good thing myself,
Yeah,
they went to Spotify and all the streaming services and said, we will not allow any music from our artists to be scraped as training material for a large language model. And this is where this is heading is if you want to use as training material, you have to pay us. And I think that's perfectly fair. But that will be the next realm of this where royalties will in. Now, if we look at this as a whole, we think, okay, they're already getting a lot of money from social networks that isn't necessarily translating down to the artist. So there's millions of dollars coming in,
yeah,
and it's very vague how it's being used and how it's transferring down. So I would be more inclined for us to push her rather than a record label doing, but that's the next step that we'll see.
yeah. That's yeah. I mean, it sounds pretty exciting. Do you feel like there's any with the incorporation of AI? Do you think it opens the doors to, I suppose, I don't know, new genres? I mean, do you think that uh, we'll hear music or songs that I suppose are completely new to us? I mean, as you said before, as musicians, we're always copying. But do you think that AI would be able to, I don't know, I suppose, become intelligent enough to create something from nothing, I suppose, or come at it from a different perspective where it's able to fuse genres and it's just going to be something that's completely blow us away, I suppose.
Well, it's up to the prompt. If the user is sufficiently clever
Yeah,
to craft a prompt that will do that, then yes,
yeah,
I don't see any reason why it isn't. I mean, it happens anyway. Music industry in general from the beginning,
yeah,
its trends went every 7 to 11 years. Somewhere in that period, there'd be a new trend, and we haven't seen this in a while. But what we do see is new genres that pop up within that period. Now, they don't really capture, they haven't captured the general public for quite a while. The last you can say was uh, EDM, electronic music, that got big, and before that, it was rap and hip hop,
yeah,
and those are the things. But there were long periods in between, longer than usual.
yeah,
But there were small genres that would pop up
yeah,
that weren't necessarily breaking out as super popular,
yeah.
and that will continue to happen.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, do you think that as well on AI? Do you think that copyright might be an issue as well? I mean, I know that recently with the images with Dale, there was a lawsuit that was filed against, I believe it was National Geographic, with a monkey taking a photo of itself with someone's camera, and I think they ended up saying that because it wasn't taken by a human being, that it nobody owns it. I suppose. Do you think that that'll be the same with music, with AI music? I mean, will people who create the prompt, will they be able to hold that copyright? I mean, it feel like it's going to be such a huge mess. I mean, does OpenAI own the copyright? Like, who owns the copyright there? What's the deal with that? What do you think?
Yeah, there you go, Simon. That's the rabbit hole that we go down that hasn't been determined yet. Now,
Yeah,
I'm talking about U.S. copyright law because I'm not aware of
Australia. Yeah,
elsewhere, but
yeah,
I
yeah,
do know what's happening here, and it's similar to everywhere else. The EU is a little ahead of everybody, but
yeah,
anyway, um, the big question is who owns the copyright? Is it the end user
yeah,
who crafted the prompt? Is it the person that programmed the neural network?
yeah,
Is it the owner of the algorithm? Is it the training material? Who trained it?
yeah.
Is it where, it can go any number of ways. Now,
Absolutely.
the U.S. Copyright Office has already ruled, it's not a law, but this is the guidance that they put out. And they said that any AI art requires a human.
Yeah,
So there has to be some human intervention in all of this. Uh, and what that means is the big problem with uh, Dali and all of those is that many artists were just taking the output, the raw output,
yeah,
and then entering it in a contest,
yeah,
things like that. And they'd win because it was really unusual and good, but they couldn't copyright it. They tried, it couldn't. And the reason why is unless there's some human intervention, and it doesn't include the prompt so far, then it's not copyrightable.
okay,
So we have to go down. This isn't a law, this is guidance.
yep, yep,
But what will happen is that there has to be a new set of laws for the digital age, and we're way behind on that already in the United States anyway.
yep.
EU's a little ahead.
When it comes to, I mean, how do you police something like that? If it was to become a law, I mean, how would you even police uh anything? What would be classed as human intervention? I mean, I could take a song, get AI to create the song, and then I could put it in my DAW and then export it. I mean, is that enough? Like how what yeah how do you feel like they're going to go about creating an actual law if they do, and how's it going to be policed? Like, how are they going to check, or I mean, do you think it could be something that could live on the blockchain? I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I can't tell you for sure how that would work, but
Yes,
I'm not an attorney. But
absolutely.
one of the things I do know is it might work one of two ways. Um, well, one way really. You can't police it so much, but you can determine how much human intervention is. And the way they generally do that in a copyright case
Yeah.
is they bring in musicologists. So in other words, if you were suing me for copyright infringement
Yeah.
and it went to trial, then we'd each bring in our musicologists and they would delve into it and they would figure out how everything would, happen. And this, is the way that gets determined a lot of times. Now, not always that way, but usually it's the musicologists that get called in
Okay.
and they have ways of figuring this out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what they are, but I know they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely interesting topic to discuss. I feel like AI, from my perspective, is almost as big as what the internet was. I feel. I feel like it was so early in. I reckon in a year's time, it's going to be so different than what it is now. But I wanted to move on. With your, I mean, you've written so many. What is it? It's 25 books at the moment that you've got out. Is that correct?
It's really 28 because there are a
28.
few that aren't in business. Yeah. And if you figured that some are in the third and fourth and fifth
Yeah.
edition, I've done
Okay.
this a lot of
Yeah,
times.
yeah, yeah. It's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite books that you've written was the Music Producer's Handbook, and there was one chapter in there that I found particularly interesting. It was the physics of sound. I've always found that topic interesting since day one. Like I've always been fascinated about sound and sound waves. But I wanted to ask you how I suppose you went about researching something like that. Um, did you conduct experiments yourself, or did you contact people? What was your process on actually writing that chapter? I feel like it's such a, I mean, there's so much information out there already, but for you to be able to make it incredibly understandable, because for me it's the best, I suppose the best chapter that I've read on physics of sound that is really easy to understand. Like what was your process with that? How did you go about writing that chapter?
Well, again, with that, I'm not that smart, so I go and I talk to really smart people,
Yeah, that's fair.
and they, they guide me. And I'm lucky enough. I live in Hollywood,
Yeah.
basically, so there's a lot of brilliant people around here, and I've met a lot of them over the years. Well, when I used to write for magazines, one of the things that many magazines would do is they'd say, "Okay, we want you to write this article, and here's 5 people we want you to talk to." So I would wind up interviewing these people, and I got to know a lot of them, a
Yeah.
lot of brilliant people through all
Yeah.
this. So that's the great source. I mean, there's other material, obviously, but it comes from directly from smart people.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, was there anybody that kind of stood out to you that you felt uh was interesting? I mean, anybody who you spoke to in regards to, I suppose, the physics of sound and whatnot that you found interesting?
Well, George Oxberger's one. George, he's a legend in Hollywood
Yeah.
anyway. First of all, he's one of the originators of tuning a room.
Okay.
And when I first came to Hollywood, I would record at Cherokee Recording Studios, which was a really big place at the time.
Yeah.
And they had 4 rooms in there. And the owners were, what would be the word? They were
Oh,
super critical of their listening environment.
yeah.
So at the end of every
Sorry.
project, they would pull the speakers out and change them, and they'd retune the room. Now, if the project only lasted a week, at the end of the week, they'd retune it. If it lasted 3 months, at the end of 3 months, they'd retune it. But they did it a lot, as compared to most people that will do it once,
Yep.
and
Yep.
that's it.
Hey, just wanted to jump in here quick, say thank you for watching this far. Please don't forget to subscribe, share it, and leave a comment. Maybe leave us some suggestions on who you want me to talk to next. And yeah, just want to let you know that this second half was recorded on a different day. So there are some stories that you might have already heard in the first half of this episode, but that's all right. It's still good. So yeah, just wanted to say thank you for watching this far, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's get back into it. Bobby, here we go. So yeah, I have built a studio in a caravan. Right, this was something that I did over the course of this year, January, February. I'd actually taken it, so I'd gone away during the week, and I was going to record the second part in my caravan away, which is this. So it would have been the same, but yeah, just to see how it goes, I suppose. But I ended up getting sick. But yeah, so one thing that I notice with new producers and new engineers when they're creating their own space at home is not necessarily knowing where to begin. That was something that I found when I started, and then I actually watched one of your seminars about room acoustics and how to soundproof your room. But I wanted to, see if you were able to, I suppose, sum it up or touch on some key points in which new people who are literally thinking today, all right, I'm gonna treat my room and try and really go for this dream that I've got. What advice or where would they begin? I suppose where would they begin in creating this kind of space?
Well, I think that's probably the most overlooked part for beginners, in that they think that the equipment is more important, and it is, but you can't mix it if you can't hear it. So you have to really tune your space if possible, and it's not possible for a lot of people because the just the conditions that they start in. But as soon as you can, you should add some room treatment. It doesn't cost that much. There are several ways to do it. Probably the easiest way these days is to go to one of the companies that supply acoustic materials, Prime Acoustic, GIK Acoustics. There's plenty of them, and usually they'll help you. They'll have starter kits that can get you going. The other way you can do it is you can actually do it yourself, and that just requires knowing how to swing a hammer for the most part, and then obtaining materials. But the whole thing you're trying to do, this is an old concept actually, and it's whenever I have a real room designer on my podcast, for instance, they always take me to task for this, for 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 espousing things that are kind of old, and of course they moved on to new techniques. But the way that's tried and true and it really works and it's easy is an RFC, a reflection-free zone. Reflection-free zone means that on the left and the right of you, you make absorptive, you make it soft, and ideally on top of you. That's kind of the key. If you can make it like a soft top and on the sides, and then put something behind you, a bookcase works really well because that's a combination of diffusion and absorption. And if you can do that, it will sound a whole lot better. Now, there are ways, and the next question is, how many panels do I need? And usually it's 2 on a side and 1 on top. And what I have behind me here is I have a couple of sound panels. Let's see, there's 4 others. There's a lot of others, but mostly what I have are ASC tube traps, which I bought 20 years ago. And I bought them particularly because I was moving studios all the time. I wanted a portable solution. And these are on stands. They're really easy. They're expensive, but that being said, I've had them for 20 years through multiple studios, so it certainly served me well. But the whole thing, it doesn't change. Doesn't matter what material you use. It's still using the RFC, reflection free zone concept. You do that, it will sound pretty good.
Would you say what are your views on the cheap acoustic foam that you can buy? It's basically everywhere. You can buy it from eBay really cheap. I noticed that's something that producers tend to go for first, and just putting, I suppose, blue tacking them, or with a thumbnail or something to their walls, thinking that it might actually help with, I suppose, sound isolation, which is different to acoustic treatment, which is another thing that young producers and engineers kind of don't distinguish the two. They always think that it's sound isolation and acoustic treatment are the same, and so, but yeah, so that they genuinely go for those acoustic foams. I mean, would you? What are your opinion? What's your opinion on that, as opposed to spending a little bit more cash and getting, say, these compressed fiberglass?
Well, it's better than nothing, but not much. One of the problems with acoustic foam is it's very limited in bandwidth, so it's only 2K and above. And most of the problems that you have in a room are below that, so it doesn't fix as much as you would hope it would. It's still useful, but it's not as useful as many people think. The other problem is if you don't get the right stuff, it's not flame retardant sometimes as well, so somewhat of a fire hazard. So you have to be careful with that. But there's lots of materials that people think will help with that. Carpet is another one. I don't know where this ever started, but egg crates.
Yeah, right.
I don't know where that.
Yeah,
There's zero help. A little bit
right.
of
Yeah,
a diffusion maybe, but
yeah,
when it comes down to it, it's easier to just get some panels. There's lots of and build it yourself. Like you said, compressed fiberglass, which is Owens Corning 703. That's not used as much anymore because it gets in your lungs. It's hard to work with because as soon as you work with it, you'll find you're itchy and it's difficult. So now we go to either rock wool. Sometimes it's hard to find. There's another. It's called by Centerteed. It's Safe and Sound, and what that is believe it or not, recycled blue jeans,
yeah. Right.
and
Okay.
that works incredibly well.
Yeah. So is it just like compressed jeans, basically, to as compressed as they can be, or how is it recycled?
No, it's chopped up. It looks like a fiber almost.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
you wouldn't know it's blue jeans
Yeah. Right.
if
Yeah.
someone wouldn't tell you that's what
Yeah.
it is.
So yeah, I was going to say that I had a cousin who lived up in Chile, which is where I'm from, and he had spent the last year saving up egg cartons to soundproof his whole bedroom. He'd got about halfway there, and he just had his wall covered. He'd saved them, um, and yeah, unfortunately, I said, look, I don't think that's going to do much. But he ended up leaving them. He ended up finishing it. It was weird, strange, but very amusing. Yeah, so it's definitely something that I see a lot of young musicians and producers doing, is treating the wrong aspects of their room. I notice a lot as well with, like, lack of attention to bass. Uh, you either notice a lot of mixes with too much bass, which I suppose would imply that their room isn't resonating bass, or the opposite. How would how would you go about fixing that, or I suppose thinking about how to counter those issues that they might come across with bass in particular?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And again, I'm not a studio designer. I know how to fix them up so they sound pretty good, but I'm not a designer. I wouldn't sit down and design a room, but I know a lot of the great ones, and I know how they do it. And now they could actually hear a room before it's built.
Yeah,
You know,
okay.
they
Yeah, yeah.
they
You're
have
right.
those tools that they can hear what it sounds like. But all that being said, there's still a certain amount of experimentation, even when it's finished from the best designers. They
Yeah,
still have to go in, and it takes them a week to move things around until they get it just right.
yeah,
So, this is one of those things where there's an art to it, and there's also a craft. The craft only goes so far, then the art takes over. That being said, to answer your question, there's the current corners are always a problem, and that's where you get your bass buildup, and that's where you get bad reflections. It's one of the problems where I see musicians who are just putting a studio in their home where they'll put it in a corner, or they'll put
yeah,
one of their speakers in a corner, and as a result, there's a lot of low end that's happening there, which then means that you're going to be bass light when you actually send the mix out.
yeah.
So you have to treat those corners, and you treat those corners with something that's really soft. And again, this thing is, when it comes to bass traps, the easiest thing is to buy them,
Right.
because
Yeah.
you're getting something that's going to work for
Yes.
sure. If you try to build it yourself, you can, but it takes a lot more experimentation. Those things are harder to do yourself. There's something, gee, I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, it's a way that you just take, for instance, if you had 703, you cut it where you have four pieces, and you have four angles, and you basically just load up the corner with
Yeah, right.
those. And at
Okay.
a certain point, you find that, oh, this is perfect. I have just enough, but it's, experimental for the most part. So it's easier to buy a number of them. Remember, there's a lot of corners. Everybody thinks, well, there's four corners in a room, but there's more than that, because your corners actually are where the wall meets the floor.
Yeah,
That's a corner.
yeah,
Wall meets the ceiling. So you have plenty of other corners in
yeah.
there.
It's definitely something people don't think about when doing. They think corners are just the actual corner in a room, and they don't realize that there's other corners that are made as well. When you add furniture as well, all that kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's in regards to choosing where to actually allocate your budget when you are, um, I suppose, creating your own space. Would you lean towards spending that money in the acoustic treatment as opposed to buying, the best gear, or would you lean back, on the gear and
Yeah, it depends on your budget, but acoustic treatment isn't as expensive as, you know, everyone thinks. So but again, if $1,000 is expensive to you, then then you really have to compromise. But generally, the cost of a reasonable preamp will get you some reasonable acoustic treatment. So it's not all that super expensive when it's all said and done. If the shipping might cost you more than you'd think, that's you pay X amount of dollars in the shipping, you'll be surprised how much it is. But that being
yeah,
said, it's still not that much.
well, that's right. Yeah, it's something that I didn't realize when I was starting. Was I always thought it was expensive. It was also, I suppose, when I started as well. It was, eBay wasn't huge. All these, yeah, Amazon, all this stuff wasn't huge back when I started. It's a lot easier now to access some really good, stuff, because of the internet, which I find really cool. Um,
Yeah.
so before we wrap up, I wanted to get to a story. I wanted to see if you have well, I enjoy listening to stories. That's something that I enjoy doing with my life, is to listen to unique stories from people. I love comedians. I love watching podcasts. This is why I started it, was basically to hear stories from people that I admire, that I look up to, because it humanizes people. And it's something that I enjoy. It's you get podcasts, especially in the music field, where it's just, education, education, education. I just like to end it with a story, whether you've met somebody along the way that has left an impression in your mind, or you've had an experience in a studio with somebody. But yeah, please, like, I really hope that you've that there's something there.
Well, back when I was a guitar player in my early days and playing in clubs, especially, I was in a band that was fairly regionally big. We had a couple records out, and part of our stage show, we had flash pots. Flash pots basically is you got some theatrical flash powder,
Yep.
and we made these pots. The pot is you just get a can and you cut it in half, and then the bottom you have two leads that are connected to a switch going into the wall for power,
Yep.
and you put just a little piece of wire across, and then you put the flash powder on top. You hit the button, you turn the power on, and then it explodes. Well, that wasn't dramatic enough, so the roadies decided that they were going to add gunpowder.
Oh my god.
And this is before there was a lot of rules about that, buying,
Yeah. Yeah.
have a can of gunpowder, and they poured a little gunpowder on top. And then you got a big bang and a flash, and that was very dramatic. Well, one night, the roadie in charge of this had a little too much to drink, and he put too much gunpowder. He got the combination wrong,
Yeah.
and he put too much gunpowder in. And when he hit the button at the end of the night, it exploded, and it took a piece of the stage out, and a big sliver went through the kick drum, up through the snare drum, and hit the drummer in the side, and he fell back off the stage.
Oh wow.
It was super dramatic, but it was the very last note of the very last song of the night.
Yeah.
So everybody thought it was part of the show,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we had to pick him up and take him to the hospital after
Oh
that.
my goodness.
And luckily, it didn't hit any vital organs or
Yeah. Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
and he was ready to play the next night. But he was sore. It hit him right below a rib, actually.
Wow.
That was one in particular. I don't think I told that story, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. It
I
reminds
was
me
just
of
thinking about it the other day. It's a good one.
it's a good one. It reminds me of the Who when they used to put gunpowder in their drums, and they put a little bit too much, and it exploded. And I think he ended up with deaf in 1 year. Is that right?
Yeah, that was on TV. That was on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Smothers Brothers show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible, man.
Yeah. So there's laws against that now. You can't do any of that stuff
Yeah. No.
anymore.
Well,
But
I suppose it's all pre. Would it be pre 9/11? Because I feel like once 9/11
oh yes,
happened, it was
very
that was
very yeah
yeah, that was when everything kind of changed.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
actually, in the
Yeah.
United States, it was kind of before that because there
Was it
was
okay?
yeah. What happened was Great White, the band Great White.
Yep.
They did a show someplace and they caught the place on fire,
Oh
and
wow.
many people died. And after that,
Oh my
they
goodness.
outlawed, any kind
Yeah.
of pyro
Yeah.
in clubs. So, yeah.
Well, fair enough. I mean, yeah, I'm surprised
Anyway,
it happened earlier.
there was a good ending to my story.
Yeah. 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 Well, nobody died. That's a good thing. Yeah, thank you so
Yeah,
much for
right.
sharing that. That's a brilliant story. Really appreciate you joining me as well. It was quite a shock when you replied, because I've been a big fan of yours for quite some time. And I was telling my partner that when you first logged on and I heard your voice through your microphone, I used to listen to your podcast all the time. And it was like, oh my God, it just took me back to that. It was like, oh wow, that's really cool. It's almost like a not starstruck, but it was bizarre because it was live almost, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, I'll tell you another story. I'll leave you with
Oh,
another
awesome.
story.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
fantastic.
just because you mentioned that,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's that something like that to happen to me.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
And I was when I was a kid, I grew up in a very small town, 5,500 people, Minersville, Pennsylvania.
yeah,
No one ever made it out of there. And I remember listening to a Rolling Stones live concert and hearing Mick Taylor play and just ripping off some fantastic licks. And I remember sitting on my bed, I was a teenager,
yeah.
and listening to this and thinking, if only I could play with people of that caliber, I would love to do it. That would just make my life. 20 years later, I'm in Hollywood, I'm in SIR, and I'm the musical director for Mick Taylor.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So Mick decided, and I produced a couple of his albums before, which is we're doing a short tour,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
became his musical. So at the end of the very brief rehearsal, he said, "I feel like playing a Stones song. You play the lead," meaning me.
Yeah.
And he detuned his guitar to that famous drop G
Yeah.
Stones tuning. And he said, "Let's play Jumpin' Jack Flash." And he hit the first chord, and all of a sudden, I just thought back to when I was a kid
Yeah.
in Pennsylvania and thinking about this and thinking, if nothing else happens in my life, I've made it because
Yeah.
I've reached what I wanted to.
Yeah.
Now, it turns out I couldn't remember how to play the song and I screwed it up badly, but that didn't matter after that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking, doing another podcast, another interview with another producer from Melbourne, and he was saying that we were talking about milestones, and yeah, what point did you feel like you'd made it? And yeah, he kind of brought up that when you do reach that milestone, it's almost like it's not as it's a great experience, but you almost feel like, oh, I've done it. Like, what's next? It's almost like a deflating feeling once you get there. But it's always good to hear stories like that because it shows that there's so much more after you've felt like you've made it. There's so much more to come. So I really appreciate you sharing that story.
Well, there you go. I don't have any more.
No, that's all good, man. I really appreciate you talking. Hopefully, maybe in the near future we'll have another discussion on some other things. Maybe I wouldn't mind getting more into AI with you. I felt like that was a fun discussion that we had. Anyway, I'll let you go. Thank you again. Please, everybody, go check out Bobby. Listen to his podcast; it's amazing. And yeah, new books. If there's anything you want to plug, then please go ahead. Otherwise, we'll let you go.
Well, the 5th edition of the Recording Engineer's Handbook just
Yep.
came out recently, 5th edition,
Yeah,
and
the 5th
it
edition.
is different. It's updated.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so I keep on updating all those books. But anyway, that new one is out.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll leave a link in the description for that. Thank you so much again, and I'll let you go, mate. Cheers for that.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank